Alright, hello. So, it's been a while. I'm just gonna ramble about S-Blast, because I feel the need to talk about it in depth a bit more recently. The background's gonna be one game on in the replay function, because I'm lazy. But hey, it's the second channel, that's what it's for. So, yeah, I'm just gonna talk about it. So, I guess I can start with talking about my early ideas of what the weapon could be before it actually released, you know? Like, this just seemed to be, like, this weird range Luna hybrid, you know? And that's kind of what I thought it was. And then it came out and I'm like, okay, this is somewhat similar to, like, S1 CRB type playstyle. Which I do still think it fits very well, but I think it does it more differently. So I'm gonna kind of break stuff down and then talk about how good it is. So, first off, let's talk about the short range mode. The short range mode is really cool. It's probably the main mode of the weapon, and I think it's easily the strongest mode it has. The area of effect of the short range mode having a radius of 40 is kind of like an insanely good strength, basically. In fact, it's so good that I'd say it like almost is better than Luna even without the long range mode existing. Not quite, the fire rate is much faster for Luna, but having that old radius size back, because Luna did used to have this radius size in Splatoon 1, is really, really good. Like, I think that blast radius size makes the weapon really reliable. It makes it harder to run down, and it's just very consistent. Like, if you're trying to hit around different corners, if you're trying to check locations, if you're dealing with people running at you, or even, most importantly, is contesting other short-range stuff. If you're contesting, like, a T-Tech, or a Tri-Slosher, or a Splash, stuff like that, S-Blast can actually reach that. It can actually hit them while being spaced properly, whereas something like Luna has to get a little bit close. So it has a bit more flexibility and a bit more reliability. This also means if you're in really big team fights, and you're just like, both teams are just running into each other, any amount of clumped up at all, and you are just going to do, like, over half health to over half of the other team in, like, a tiny instance. And so I think the short-range mode is quite strong. Obviously, the main weakness of the short-range mode is the fact that it kills really slow. Like, it is a very slow kill time. It's the same as range blasters kill time for 2 indirects, obviously, you know, minus the travel time. But it's up close instead. Now, a lot of this would be comparing to Clash here, because Clash kind of has the similar problem where it has the same radius size, but it has a slow kill time. However, there's a few things that are different here, outside of just the kill time isn't the same thing on these weapons. The main difference is that Clash cannot have a way to threaten to kill you faster. Like, if you are fighting a Clash, and the Clash has good aim, that 2-shot kill time is still 2 directs. That is still slower than some actual guns. Like, 52 will shoot you and kill you faster than a Clash will double direct you. There is no fear of just instantly dying to them if they can, like, have line of sight at you. And so while Clash can threaten you, like the AoE is useful on Clash, there's no reason to be afraid of the weapon. Like, at a certain point, as long as it doesn't have an angle where it can hit its 4 shots, you know you can kill it before it will kill you, most of the time. So that loses a lot of its threat. And, like, honestly, this is where, my opinion now, Clash is like, oh, okay, if Clash needs to be good, its direct needs to combo with a single indirect, that kind of thing. But, as a whole, I really think that the short-range mode is pretty good, all things considered. I think the short-range mode is probably the best part of the weapon. I don't think it outclasses Luna or Clash. I think Clash is just doomed anyway, and I think Luna is just not going to be picked because Tri just better weapon, better kit. Which brings me to the long-range mode, because if the long-range mode did not exist, this thing would still just be a worse Tri-Slosher. The long-range mode basically keeps this thing from being outclassed by Tri. But the long-range mode itself is probably the mode that was the most overrated by me and probably most other people. Now, there are still a lot of positives of the long-range mode. The main thing being that you can jump and shoot with it. However, this is not completely perfect. There is a downside to jump shooting with this thing that's kind of near exclusive to it, which is, if you want to jump shot, you have to shoot right after you leave the ground. If you want to jump and wait to a certain point and then shoot, you are going to get the short-range mode. There is a way to mitigate this, but it's situational in itself, which is you can drop off a ledge. If you drop off a ledge or drop off an ink rail, then you can have the long-range mode. Or actually, I don't know if the ink rail thing is true. It might just be the ledge. I'm honestly just blanking on it, but you have to drop off a ledge if you want to delay the shot. And that's very useful because you can't really miss your shot. Like, you just have too long of a time. So if you want to wait for something like maybe a bucket who you know you can kill and after they slosh can't move as much, you have to, like, not jump, basically. You have to stay grounded and wait for it or drop off a ledge. And so that has some limitations. So that's important. Obviously, there's some trade-offs. You have a bit more direct range than Range Blaster does. You have much faster shot velocity. And, you know, being able to jump shoot is still more useful than not having that option at all. Like, the fact that you can go for jump shots at all and threaten that is still good. The main downside of the long-range mode, however, is the AoE radius is tiny. So, for reference, the short-range mode I just talked about has a radius of 40 units, which is pretty large. Range Blaster has a radius of 35 units. Rapid and Normal Blaster has a radius of 33. Now, the long-range mode of this weapon has either a radius, I can't remember which is correct, of 18 or 20. That is very, very much smaller. In fact, it's over half that of the normal firing mode. It's a tiny radius, which, yes, is still technically AoE, but it's much more limited. If you are poking someone behind a decent bit of cover, you cannot hit them. There are a lot of situations where a range blaster could effectively poke someone out of a position, but as an S-Blast, I look at it and go, okay, no, I have to go closer. I can't do that. I have to get further ahead and use my short-range mode. Which, luckily, the range difference isn't that drastic, but it is important. There's a lot of positions where Range Blaster can play to poke behind stuff where S-Blaster can't. So S-Blast long-range mode is kind of better to think about it as having extremely minimal to even no AoE. Technically, it does have AoE, so, like, that's not correct, but it's better to think of it as you are using this to target people in the open. The AoE is most useful when following up on opponents who are already low. So, like, if you hit a guy and they run away from you, that's where the long-range mode is good, because even if they run into a corner, you might be able to hit them while they've barely gone behind it. That gives you some leniency. Outside of that, it's really just situations like the one in the background right there, where it's a guy in the open. So you are able to shoot them and almost certainly hit them. Like, this isn't a charger. You still have some area of effect. Like, I didn't have a direct hit there, but I will still have enough of a hit to deal damage to the other player, to get reliable value in the fight. So, the long-range mode is much more of a follow-up. It is much more to pressure people in the open. It is much more of a going for one-shots type mode. It doesn't really do the exact same thing something like Range Blaster would do. And I think that's okay, but it is worth noting that's a limitation. That's why I don't agree with the idea that this would outclass something like Range Blaster or Rapid or anything else. Like, the only thing it competes with is Clash, because this thing can do what Clash wants to do better. But it cannot do the exact same things Range wants to do. It can do some of them. Like, you can long-range mode to pressure people in the open or go for jump directs at that range. Like, that is the things you can do like Range Blaster can, and in fact, you could do it slightly better than Range can. But that's the trade-off that the weapon comes with. So, that's its two firing modes. This calls into question its area of effect role. I still think it's an AoE weapon, mostly because of short range, but that's the thing. It is a short-range AoE weapon. If you are playing with this weapon in your comp, and you want to take advantage of the AoE, you have to get the weapon in places where it can poke people in short-range mode. The long-range one is nice to threaten people in more flat terrain. Like, that's fine if it's something like Undertow and someone's trying to go on top mid, and you could just, you know, jump and shoot top mid and direct them there. But the second they get behind any form of cover, you need to be able to adapt to getting into short range mode. If you want the area of effect pressure specifically, that's where you have to have it. And so I think it plays sometimes like a CRB and sometimes like a Splatoon 1 Luna Blaster, I guess, because you have the radius difference. That's kind of more of the hybrid, which I guess is closer to what I originally thought. But it definitely doesn't feel the same as either of those weapons. So, I think the weapon has limitations, and because of that, I'll get into this later, but I don't think this is the best blaster in the game. Maybe if it had a different kit, I do think with a different kit, it could probably be the best blaster in the game. If it got, like, a really good kit. I will talk about it later, but the best blaster in the game is easily Rapid Deco. I think Rapid Deco is solidly the best one in the game. However, as a main weapon, this obviously has a lot of potential. It has its own unique niche, and this is kind of one of the few examples we've seen of, like, a short-range AoE weapon that can be picked over Tri. And compared to Tri, it does the AoE better, but it's worth using because of a lot of the other things. So, moving from that, let's talk about the kit. So, Sprinkler has 3 use cases. It can charge your special, which I'm going to ignore because bombs also do that. So I'm talking about comparisons with bombs, because let's be real here, that's what this weapon is for. So, you can poke with it to get your special, but a bomb will do it better. You can use it to paint your feet, which some bombs can't do, that's fair. Like, that depends on what other bomb it would get in the future. And, most importantly, you can use it to body block a little bit. Now, against certain weapons like Tetras, or ballpoint long range mode, or NZAP without Object Shredder, that is actually kind of useful. Like, that has saved me in fights, that has proven to be used. Would it be as helpful as being able to throw a splat bomb at their feet, or burst bomb them, or suction to cut off their movement, or even a cooked curling bomb if it wasn't as expensive? No. The nicest thing I can say about Sprinkler, yeah, you can technically bait people with it. Like, you can have a Sprinkler in the open, and if they go to shoot it down, you can try to long-range direct them. But that's very situational. Because most of the time, they'll see where you're throwing the Sprinkler, so they'll know. The nicest thing I can say about this weapon is you can use it a lot. Range Blaster has a way better bomb, but after you throw the bomb, you have 2 shots. After you throw a Sprinkler with S-Blast, you have 4 shots. That is double the ink efficiency. And for weapons that are ink hungry, that is genuinely really useful. Now, part of that is not due to Sprinkler, but due to the fact that this weapon just has better ink efficiency than something like Range Blaster. It has less whiting frames and more shots on the tank. But it's worth noting. A lot of the time, I think, like, comeback is something you want on this weapon. I think comeback is a must on this weapon. Comeback will give you 5 shots. So even if the Sprinkler isn't as good, there's really not a reason to avoid using it. Like, you might as well pop it and, like, throw it at your feet, as long as it's not going to drain your ink tank, because it might help you. However, it's not a bomb. And not having a bomb adds something onto the list for this blaster specifically of things your comp needs to have. You need 2 of the 3 weapons in your comp to have a bomb. 3 of the 4 if it's a short-range comp. Like, if you don't have a weapon with range, you know, like a ballpoint or a pencil or something, you need 3 lethal, or not lethal bombs, you first. You need 3 bombs. 3 non-curling bomb type bombs in your comp. Like, that's what you need to compensate for just the sub-weapon. And as a blaster, you are already compensating for the main weapon's lack of paint. You are already compensating for playing around AoE and all that stuff. So you are already limited. Not having a bomb makes the comps of this weapon more limited. And then the special makes it even more limited because you have Reef Slider. Now, for the record, I think Reef Slider is actually quite okay in this meta. Like, I don't think it's a bad special. And on S-Blast specifically, I would go as far as to say it's even good. Because this weapon gets a bit more out of Slider than other weapons. Now, a lot of kind of just get-kills specials struggle in this meta. Like, Trizuka and Kraken are good examples. And the main reason is because these are kind of all-or-nothing specials. If you Kraken and it's just against a team of cooler players, they're going to run circles around you, and then if you kill one of them, they're back in a second, and then they're going to kill your end lag, and it's probably better for them. If you're a Trizuka, like, weapons like Squeezer over here being picked for Trizuka, for example, are not to just have a Zuka. You pick it for the main gun, and then the Zuka is for the inkjets. You shoot the jetpack. You're not there to shoot the cooler players who are running at light speed. You are there to shoot jetpacks. And if you do not get a kill, then your special just does next to nothing. Slider, on the other hand, will almost always do something when it is used properly, because it's just a giant hit radius. Like, it's very much the exact same strength that the main weapon's short-range mode plays to, which is it will go in a big team fight, and it will damage everybody. Except it's a wider radius, you add paint, and it's 70 damage instead of 50 to 70. And if you do that in a team fight and hit enough people, you will probably have people who are able to follow up on it, and that will probably win you team fights, or it will take out a number of cooler players. Obviously, Slider has other uses. In particular, this special's best mode is easily zones. The zones cheese on this weapon for any map that has it is incredibly, incredibly good. Like, I think on a map like Maki Zones, this is a good special. Like, it is incredibly threatening and you have to play around it. Like, I have fought enough teams to see the point where enemies are making calls like, we need to get rid of this guy's slider. We need to bait the slider. We need to cover this position. Once I have a special that starts having the ability to influence how the other team plays, that's probably a good sign. That's not on every map, but on the zones map where that can happen, that is really good. If you can force people on the other team to overextend or to be paranoid about you, then that's good. Like, that's generally something I find quite nice as a special. On Rainmaker, it can pop shields. I don't think this is even as good as I used to think. I think the main weapon is still okay on Rain, but it doesn't do a lot of shield damage. The Sprinkler can kind of help with that, funny enough. It kind of can do decent shield damage. But for the most part, I don't think the insta-pop on the Rainmaker shield is as good, because it depends on the Rainmaker shield being in the open. That being said, when the shield is in the open, being able to stack that explosion with your slider one is really good. So, it's very situational, but depending on where the Rainmaker is, it can be useful. Like, for example, it's very good on Museum with the spinners, because you can slider one side, blow up the shield, and have it cover the other, and, like, half the plat just turns into a nuclear bomb. Like, that's good, obviously. But at the same time, if you pop the Rainmaker shield and none of the enemy team needs to be near it, then, like, it's just kind of whatever. Like, you need to pop it because you need the map it provides, but it's not really worth the value of a whole special compared to what other specials could do in the mode. Tower control, you can kind of tank a Booyah Bomb, which is a legitimate use. However, nobody picks Booyah weapons. The only thing that would get picked is Machine, and Machine is barely ever picked right now, because Cooler is fast. If Cooler dies off and Machine gets more popular, then yeah, that will probably be a common thing. But until then, the special's just whatever on TC. It doesn't do anything for the mode. Not a big deal, because Blaster on tower control is, you know, fine. Like, you don't really need the special as much for that mode, because your main gun just actually influences the objective in that mode. Finally, there's Clams, the second best Blaster mode, because you have people who are getting themselves located by holding power clamps, which is obviously nice for a weapon that can hit people behind walls. And you have Slider Cheese. It is basically worse Kraken Cheese, outside of the fact that it is faster. It's there, though. It's nice, and with Cooler, you can go for it without much penalty. If you have, like, 2 to 3 footballs, it's probably worth it, so... yeah, I mean, it's a thing. It's fine. I think, for the most part, Cooler being present helps the special, mainly because you can die and it's okay. You can pull people backward, and that's helpful for slowing down Cooler stuff. So, like, I think the special on the weapon is fine. Could there be better options? Absolutely. There could 110% be other things on the special that would probably be better. In fact, even some of the weaker specials I mentioned, like Kraken, might be better on this thing, just because it'll keep the main gun doing its job more than a slider will. So, general top player opinion on the weapon has been pretty mixed. There are some people who believe in it. There are some people who rate it decently highly. I am probably the only person who has ever put it in high tier. And I would probably stick with high tier for my assessment of the weapon, but it would definitely not be as high up as I put it for my tier list video. This is being very idealistic if I'm still putting it there. That being said, I'd still do it. Like, I don't think it's the best blaster. Mainly because just jetpack is really broken, but I mean rapid is solid, and I'll talk about rapid in a bit. But regardless, the only real main positive opinion I've heard of it from a notable player would be Lobster, a Japanese range blaster player, which the thoughts on this were really early, like a few days into the season, but they mentioned that they think the weapon could be very solid in zones, and even a bit in turf war, which I guess, sure, the kit can play around it if you want an AoE in turf. But yeah, I mean, zones is kind of the main thing this is picked in, so not too surprising. Like on zones maps where slider is very threatening, I think that is where this weapon is best. So, yeah, cool. Alright, so let's wrap this up. From my personal experience, I think the weapon is situational, but still good. I think the weapon has strengths it can play around and a unique identity. I do think, however, it is not one-trickable at all. I do not think you can only pick this gun. The good news is that, compared to something like range, it is much easier to play other guns with it. Like, if you play range, you have to switch off it sometimes in an all-mode setting. But it's really hard to do that because you have to be exceptionally strong in range blaster. Whereas this weapon has a lot more lenient qualities between its two firing modes and larger AoE, to where it's more reasonable to be able to pick it in something else. Recently, what I've been doing is picking it alongside Rapid Deco, because Rapid Deco can be picked most places as well. It deals with a comp that 92 struggles with, like it can deal with stuff like other Rapids, or like comps that just seek to wall you out of short range the entire game. It can cover longer range maps, and, you know, it can get jetpack, and it has a bomb. So if you need more poking tools, it can cover it very well. Yes, pencil is probably the best charger in the game right now. So, I think with all of that intact, having another weapon has been very nice, honestly. And it's kind of the main thing I wish I could have done sooner during the NA Opens. The NA Opens were a weird thing. It's probably the best results the weapon has gotten, because Last Resort hasn't entered anything else, so I don't know if we would be able to get one better. And, you know, we came close against a number of teams, and obviously there's been progress that's happened. During that tournament specifically, I mostly picked S-Blaster because it's just what worked. With cooler comps, I wasn't super comfortable with Stamper at the moment. My original plan was to play Machine, which did not work with cooler comps, and we did not have fun with, or like, or do well with. And so, we made the call to do it. And I still think that was the right call. Like, even nowadays, Machine is not doing super hot, and it's only really doing things on players who are dedicated to Machine, and I am not. So, like, I don't think that would have happened given 4 days to adjust to the fire rate nerf and cooler. So I think the decision was the right one in terms of what we did. I think our loss was more attributed to just mentality stuff in the second open. But that's a topic for another time. Regardless, I don't attribute the weapon so much. I've done a few pickups with the weapon. It's pickups, so I don't equate them too much. There's not really too many results that are notable. But one main one I did was trying with Dooley, Ballpoint, and Zap with Jared Helix, or not Jared Helix, that's different team. That's for 30th coming up. With Jared, Wave, and Mecha in a Proving Grounds tournament, which we were able to 3-0 in Control, the team that beat my team in the Open, and we were able to go against a few other, like, notable higher level teams, not really as much as top level, and get results from there. I think results-wise is still very unclear for the weapon. I wanted to talk about it, but it's hard to say because I'm kind of the only person getting top level results with this weapon, like West or JP, so there's just not a lot to go off of, and it's hard to tell what other factors could play in. It's easier to tell what stuff is based on the weapon when more people are trying to get results with it, because you'll have less factors outside of your control in it. Whereas for me, it's like you can also look into stuff like my team or my own playstyle and my own mistakes and pickups and blah blah blah. Whereas when you have a lot of people, you just have a lot of data on, okay, here's how the weapon is performing in all these different players and people trying it, and is it working in any of them? No, okay, the weapon's probably not good. So, I mean, that's kind of how things are right now. I think it is still a higher tier weapon. I think that it is more situational. Having Rapid Deco as a weapon to pick around it has made me feel a lot better. Personally, I'm very happy to have something more reliable. The one note I'll end off on is I think that this weapon will probably be a lot better as time and patches go on. Mostly because, one, it's a new weapon, and they've been pretty good at buffing the new weapons. Sniper Rider right now is very strong, Nova has a solid niche and mostly just deals with ballpoint competition, and even then it's easy use, and Swig is a fine zones weapon, mostly held back by having 2 terrible sub-weapons for it in a row. So I think as a whole, they have handled the new main weapons very well, and I would be kind of surprised if this weapon doesn't get any form of buffs or a better kit at some point in the future. So I think, you know, things are probably going to get easier long term. We are probably going to get something to look forward to. I would be very surprised if this is the absolute peak this weapon is statistics-wise. So I think there is much more to look forward to than something like Range Blaster, which has no buffs in its competitive future, and the last thing we can pray for is the CRB kit or Grim in 2025 or whenever the hell that happens, if it happens. So yeah, it's not meta, it's not the best blaster. You can argue it's the best main weapon blaster. I think that might be fair, but I don't think we're going to find out until it gets a God kit. And right now, Rapid Deco's kit is just really fucking good. And Rapid is still fine as a main weapon. So, yeah. I still have fun with it. I'm mostly working on alternating a bit. I'll say full disclosure here, I'm not playing Stamper very much, mostly just because, like, it just doesn't really fit with our comms and roll, and I've just gotten a bit rusty with it. I think it's better I work on this stuff for the time being. But, I mean, I'll still play it in pickups and stuff. I still like the weapon. Obviously, I still want to use it. But yeah, this has been my long ramble on S-Blast. I think it's in a fine spot. I hope that there are buffs to Slider, or to the long-range mode, or a new kit. Those are my top 3 hopes. Give me a burst bomb. It would be fun on this weapon. Anyway, that's my full thoughts. Thanks for watching this ramble.